All right, today we are jumping into one of the most famous and, let's be honest, most misunderstood books in the entire Bible, the Book of Revelation. You know the one, it's packed with beasts, dragons, and all these cryptic numbers. For centuries, people have treated it like a crystal ball for predicting the future. But what if that's not the point at all? Let's dive in and see if we can demystify this thing.
So let's just tackle the biggest question right out of the gate. Is this book a secret coded timeline of events that leads to the end of the world? Is our job to match its symbols with today's news headlines to figure out when it's all going to go down? I mean, it's a super popular idea, but it might just be the biggest misunderstanding of the whole book.
You see, to really get what's going on here, we have to listen to the author. A man named John actually tells us how we're supposed to read his work, right at the beginning. And if we ignore his instructions, we're pretty much guaranteed to get lost. But if we follow them, the book's powerful message of hope just snaps right into focus.
Okay, so first things first, we have to get a handle on what this book actually is. John isn't trying to write a newspaper from the future. He's using a very specific and ancient style of writing that his first-century audience would have recognized in a heartbeat. The book's original title is our very first clue. Our English word revelation comes from the Greek word apocalypsis. Now, I know that sounds a lot like apocalypse, but it doesn't mean end of the world. It literally means an unveiling or a revealing. So the whole point isn't to hide the meaning in some secret code, it's to reveal something, to pull back the curtain and show us what's happening from God's heavenly perspective.
John is actually a brilliant communicator, and he weaves together three different styles of writing. First, he calls it an apocalypse, which tells us right away, expect symbolic visions. Second, he calls it a prophecy. Now that means it's a message from God for his people meant to either comfort them or challenge them right where they are. And third, he frames it as a circular letter sent to 7 real historical churches. This right here is our roadmap. It's symbolic, it's timely, and it's deeply personal.
And that last point, the fact that it's a letter, is so incredibly important. This book wasn't written for some far-off future generation. It was written to address the real-life, nitty-gritty struggles of first-century Christians. So let's take a look at who exactly John was writing to.
Just picture the scene for a second. John is a political prisoner, exiled to this barren island called Patmos, all because of his faith. And from this prison island, he's writing to these 7 little church communities scattered across the massive, powerful Roman Empire. These weren't just names on a page. These were real people he knew, and they were facing some intense pressure.
And what kind of pressure are we talking about? Oh, pretty much everything. Some of the churches were getting lazy and apathetic because they were wealthy. Others were compromising their values just to fit in with the Roman culture, with all its emperor worship and pagan rituals. And many were facing straight-up persecution. We're talking harassment, prison, even death under emperors like Nero and Domitian. The temptation to just give up and go along with the spirit of the age was huge.
So, right in the middle of this high-stakes crisis, John has this incredible vision. He gets swept up into God's throne room in heaven, and what he sees there completely changes the game. It is the master key that unlocks the entire book.
In this vision, God is on his throne and he's holding a scroll with 7 seals. This scroll is everything. It's God's plan for history, his purpose for bringing justice and his kingdom to earth. But there's a huge problem. No one in heaven, on earth, or under the earth is worthy enough to open it. And John just starts weeping because it looks like history is stuck, like evil gets the final say.
But then, one of the elders tells John, "Don't weep, because someone is worthy, the Lion of the tribe of Judah." This is a classic title for a powerful, conquering king. So John is expecting to see this fierce, majestic lion. But when he turns to look, what he sees is a lamb. And not just any lamb, a little lamb that looks like it's been slaughtered. It's bloody, it's been sacrificed, and yet it's standing. It's alive, and it's victorious.
This one image completely redefines power. See, the world thinks victory comes through force and violence. That's the way of the lion. But God's kingdom arrives through the slain lamb. Jesus conquered evil not by killing his enemies, but by dying for them. His death on the cross wasn't some tragic defeat. It was his enthronement as the true king of the world. This is the upside-down logic you have to get to understand anything else in the book. Okay, so now that we have this slain lamb key in our hands, we can finally start to make sense of the book's most famous and confusing symbols. Those beasts, the great prostitute named Babylon, and of course, that notorious number, 666.
These symbols aren't supposed to be literal monsters. They're archetypes, drawing on images from all over the Old Testament.
The dragon, that's the spiritual power behind evil. The beasts that come out of the sea and the land, they represent corrupt human empires, like Rome in John's day, that conquer through violence and demand total allegiance. And Babylon is the book's code name for these empires, any nation that lifts up its own economic and military power as if it were a god.
So what's the deal with 666? Well, this wasn't some mystery for the original readers. It was actually a clever and pretty dangerous political jab. See, in ancient languages like Hebrew, letters also had number values. And if you spelled out the name and title Nero Caesar, the emperor who was famous for his brutal persecution of Christians, the letters added up to exactly 666. For them, Nero was the ultimate beast, but he's really just one example of this archetype that pops up again and again throughout history.
All right, so after showing how the way of the beast and Babylon is ultimately defeated by the way of the Lamb, the book doesn't end with fire and brimstone. It ends with the most profound, beautiful vision of hope in the entire Bible, the complete restoration of absolutely everything.
John sees this stunning final vision of a new heaven and a new earth. And get this, it's not about believers escaping earth to float on a cloud somewhere. It's about heaven and earth being reunited. God himself comes down to live with humanity right here in a renewed creation that's pictured as a magnificent city, the New Jerusalem.
And maybe the most powerful part of this whole vision is what's missing. The end of the story is defined by what is gone forever. There is no more death, no more mourning or crying or pain. All the brokenness and tragedy of human history is finally healed. There isn't even a temple, because God's presence isn't confined to a building anymore. It fills every single inch of the new creation.
So if you had to boil the entire message of Revelation down, this is pretty much it. The book is brutally honest that evil is real and the world is a broken place. But it promises that Jesus, the Lamb who was slain and is now alive, is the true King, and he is coming back to make all things new. The message to those 7 churches, and to every generation since, is to hold on, to resist the temptations of Babylon, and to stay faithful, because in the end, God's love wins.
And that leaves us with a final, really challenging question for ourselves. John used symbols like Babylon and the beast to call out the corrupt, self-worshipping power of the Roman Empire in his day. So if this book is a timeless challenge to resist those kinds of systems in the power of the Lamb, what does Babylon look like in our world today? What systems demand our total allegiance and promise us security through wealth and power? That's the question Revelation leaves ringing in our ears.